Sorry, gang, that recording meeting message goes out all the time. So I'd like to welcome everybody to our October APAC meeting. I'm John Davey, I'm the chair. We're just getting the room configured with the microphones and the cameras, but I think we're underway now. I'd like to begin by introducing everybody tonight. Up here at the dais is Vice Chair Tim White and Vice Chair John Reslier. Brooke should be up here, but Brooke Washburn is our secretary, one of our officers, and here we go. I'm just trying to get this going here, gang. It's a lot of driving to do. Okay, I'm almost with everyone. Sorry, and here we go. So we're calling the meeting to order. A little different here tonight for us. We begin every meeting with an opportunity to adopt our meeting agenda. If there's no objections to what we have planned tonight from our officers, none seen. Moving forward, when we begin our meetings, we have an opportunity to have public comment from anybody who's viewing the meeting remotely or is here in the audience. So these are public comments on items that are not on our agenda. We don't have a project-heavy agenda tonight, where it's more of a tutorial. So if there's anybody who'd like to make a public comment, we have a couple microphones floating around. If there's anybody here who wants to make a comment, and if not, if you're on Zoom and you'd like to make a comment, you can press the raise hand button, and then we'll ask you to make your comment. Or if you're phoned in, I don't see anybody phoned in, but you can press the *9 to ask to make a comment. Okay, seeing none. When John makes his, Okay, so you're warned now, John. There'll be some questions. So with that, John Heidel is here tonight, District 1 Supervisor, and provides some supervisor communications for us. And you have a microphone there you can turn on?
I do. Oh yeah, turn this on. It's on green, so I think it's over, flipped over. Okay, so there's three things I wanted to make sure the public was aware of this evening. The first is the redistricting effort that's going on right now. The next meeting is tomorrow evening, 6, and I'm expecting it to run about an hour and a half, 6 to 7:30. There is going to be in-person participation in the board supervisors meeting room, as well as Zoom connectivity. So it's a hybrid meeting for people who would like to be there in person. They're welcome to come. There is an agenda that describes basic steps they're going to go through, but what I think will probably happen is a presentation of all 7 alternative maps that I've heard about so far, and a brief description of what the approach was given those maps, because each one of the ones, if you've looked online, has a little banner across the bottom of it that describes, what the community, with the CSD orientation, the city orientation. I wrote one for the one that I proposed, which is community regions, high density population community regions on the western slope was a primary emphasis of that. So each of those should have a brief definition on the bottom. You can look at it and say, what was the basis for deciding on these boundaries? And from there, I think it's going to be opened up to the public for comment. What's the general impressions? Which ones do you prefer? Do you not prefer? Did we miss something totally in presenting a different alternative? I've heard some kind of unique alternatives that would totally reorient all of El Dorado County. I'm not sure those will go forward, but there is that part of it out there. So that's the main thing, is public participation, and then board comment, should the board choose to comment on any of them. And I'll just emphasize too, is I think if people now recognize what a community of interest is, for instance, Serrano Village, whatever you want to call it, the village of Serrano, recognizes now that with a population of about 14,000 people, they are a community of interest. And so they've expressed a concern that they want to make sure that their entire community is in one district, whatever district it is, that it doesn't get split up. So that, I think, is a prime example of a community of interest. What I did with the mapping I did on the community regions was look at where the high population, high density areas on the western slope, where we define them as community regions, which is where the growth will occur. Probably 80% of the growth in El Dorado County in the next 20 years will occur within those community regions. Because I think those community regions have a lot more in common than other areas of the county that are not affected by that growth. So that was kind of the basis of the map that I proposed. And like I said, the map that was produced is not what I proposed, but it's along the same lines. It's the same basic philosophy, even though it's not the same boundaries. So it's a good starting point. So that's the first thing, is the redistricting. There is another meeting then scheduled November, I'm trying to think, it's about the middle of November, the 14th or something. Cindy, do you remember? It's a follow on to this. So another opportunity for the public to weigh in. I'll just remind everybody that the drop dead for the Board of Supervisors to approve a map is December 15th. I suspect we will be going through those discussions in early December, and we'll make that decision before December 15th without having to have a special meeting or anything. But clearly this has been a rapid event because there hasn't been the normal time available between when the census was done and when the redistricting maps have to be produced. But the reason it's driven by December 15th is because the election cycle for 2022 starts very shortly thereafter. The primary election is going to be in June. And so candidates are going to be announcing, and not so much concern, I don't think, for redistricting El Dorado County, but certainly for redistricting congressional districts and all of those longer term government agencies. They have to redistrict at the same time the county does. So that's the first point of interest. The second one,
November 4th.
November 4th. Thank you. November 4th. So that's pretty quick coming after this,
No.
this one. So November 4th.
4th. I was a Thursday. Cindy confirms the 3rd.
Okay. So the second thing I want to bring to everybody's attention is the Board of Supervisors, in reviewing the impacts of the Caldor fire, have designated $5 million $5 million of contingency is a correct term, to be set aside to be determined based upon staff's recommendations and review by the board, how that money is going to be distributed to help with the relief associated with Caldor. $5 million doesn't go very far, but at least it gives us enough flexibility to get things started. So the board did decide, given everything that's going on, that was an important thing to do, is set aside money to get that relief effort started. It's not going to do a whole lot, but it's going to get things started, which allows us to do some of the early planning, et cetera, et cetera. And then the last thing I wanted to mention is we are having a Caldor special meeting at the Board of Supervisors, and that is on November 14th. Let's see if I got that right. November 2nd? It seems like it's way too early. I see what I've got here. The calendar flipped on me. That's what it is. November 2nd. All right, let's take a look at that. Yep, it's a special board meeting. Thank you, Cindy. November 2nd, it's from 1 to 3 p.m. Again in the board chambers, but that's going to have more details on what the relief planning today is, what the execution has been. And so that's the third event that's coming up pretty quick here that people may want to get involved with, because it is a major event. I will tell everybody, probably read it already, that FEMA denied our request for individual assistance for the Caldor fire victims, which is a major consequence because a lot of people will not have any ability to rebuild short of other relief funding that becomes available. So that was a huge disappointment, but we had already submitted a letter to the President of the United States imploring him that whether FEMA recommended that or not, that he override it. And we do have both Senator Feinstein and Senator Padilla's support in doing that. Most recently, Senator Padilla's office said he would step up and go to bat for us. So they're going to be working with Biden's administration to try to get that FEMA recommendation overturned. So maybe we will get the individual assistance, maybe we won't, but we're certainly doing everything we can to try to encourage that to happen. So more to come on that. So those were the three things that I wanted to present, and then questions anybody may have on anything I can help answer.
Okay, we're going to go around the room first, and we'll ask.
Okay.
Anybody who's online watching, if you have questions for Supervisor Heidel about what he's discussing tonight, go ahead and raise your hand now, and we'll get to you as we finish the room.
If we could circle back to the Montano development that was passed, gosh, was that May, April, something, March?
Just, yeah, early spring. Yeah.
That was, yeah, March Planning Commission, yeah.
It's between some canceled APAC meetings and then the Caldor fire. here we are. I have two questions. When the discussion was happening between the Board of Supervisors, and her name is escaping me right now. She is a female Board of Supervisors. She was ecstatic that there was going to be private security. We as residents had suggested private security. I have gone through all the documents that the Board of Supervisors had posted for that meeting, and I could not actually find that written anywhere. It was a request. Do you know? And I know this, you're
Not without going
way
back and looking at it.
Yeah.
Did you look at whether or not it had been conditioned as part of the planning commission
No,
review?
but I'll look into the conditions.
That's usually
Planning
where
Commission?
planning commission conditions the projects. That may have been where,
Okay,
if it is in writing, where it is. Otherwise, typically the Board of Supervisors doesn't add conditions. They can.
right.
I don't recall adding a provision for security at that
No, I think
supervisor's
she
meeting.
had seen it in the Planning Commission conditions, so I was just, but I had not actually seen it written from the developer as something that he was.
We could research it. I just don't know off the
Yeah,
top of my head if that
perfect.
was in there or not, but
The second question is for residents who, once this is all up and the amphitheater is up and running, making noise complaints formally. When this was first going through the environmental report process, someone from the county had reported that there were no complaints to the county. We as neighbors, I know I had at one point made a phone call to the sheriff because Relish Burger was playing way too late, way too loud.
Yep.
But that apparently was not documented to the county. So we as a neighborhood would like to know if we have to go that step and make a complaint, is there a formal process through the county so that gets documented?
great question, because we got involved with that with the Mexican restaurant, something rather Lindo, that's off of
Oh,
Mexican,
over at the Bass
Philadelphia,
Lake.
that's like-
off of Bass Lake Road because of complaints coming from Serrano residents about noise, and they were holding evening band events and stuff that weren't authorized, didn't have a conditional use permit. And as a result of doing the investigation, what we found out at the county level, there was no communication from the sheriff to code enforcement or anybody else when there was a complaint. We had a silo operation. They would go out and they would ask them to turn the music down, and that was kind of the end of it. There was no, in most cases, I think there was a written report, but that wasn't communicated with code enforcement. Through our efforts to try to make sure that's happened, as I understand it, that communication is now fluid. That when the sheriff goes out and takes a complaint relative to noise and stuff, that goes to our code enforcement. Because they really have shared responsibility. Code enforcement needs to follow up and make sure that the owner knows that they're in violation of the county codes, and here's why. And that's happened with the Mexican restaurant on Bass Lake Road. I don't know that it's happened anywhere in Montana unless it's been recent, because this is about the last 2 months.
Yeah,
that
no,
started.
this was years ago. My babies were babies.
Okay, all right. So So years ago, I'm sure that didn't exist, but it became obvious that the county just wasn't connected between complaints of that type for the enforcement part of it. The sheriff only goes out, there's no follow-up, basically. They file a
Right.
report and that's it.
Right.
And if it happens 4 or 5 times, I don't know that they do anything beyond just file a report. But that's changed now with code enforcement. And we did increase the staffing on code enforcement substantially by board budgeting. So I think we now have the resources to follow up and do those things. So we
So
had
at
a
this
lot,
point, reporting to the sheriff's department.
absolutely
should
right thing to
be-
do. Call it into the sheriff's office, because obviously they're 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Code enforcement is Monday through Friday type of operation for the most part. But the sheriff's office is still the right place to call in with a complaint. And if our system is working the way I've been told it is now, that written report should automatically go to code enforcement. They can make a note of it and then follow up accordingly with whoever the business owner is, which is what's happened recently. So I think that's a huge improvement. There's a lot of noise complaints out in other parts of the county as well, in along Highway 49, out in Lotus Coloma, that area. There's a lot of wineries and noises that happen and people complain about it. And it was the same kind of thing before. It was strictly the sheriff going out and telling them to turn the music down. But I would ultimately like to see that we would have the ability to go out and do measurements of what the sound is. And that equipment is not that expensive these days. Go out and do a sound measurement and document what it is. Now, whether or not we could find a way to do that, 24/7, 365, which means it would have to be the sheriff's department, I don't know. But they're a pretty simple monitor you can take up, and the accuracy, if they're calibrated annually, is within 5%. And all you're really trying to say is, how far off are they? right? People's sense of noise is totally different than what you measure with a calibrated device sometimes. So, yeah. But anyway, that has changed.
Raise those issues with before I got to the planning commission and at the planning commission. And the response, the planning department essentially said that it's self-monitoring for the noise levels.
I mean, it was a condition of approval that they operate within certain hours and certain decibel limits were part of it. As you mentioned, Supervisor, when Poor Red's operation up in Camino,
Right.
they decided they were going to buy their own sound thing to measure it against what the residents around them were saying, and they could show that they kept it to 70 or whatever the limit was. So it's not that expensive to do. And since it's a condition of approval, it's not just a code violation, it's a violation of the building permit or the approval to go ahead. So it has more consequences if they continue to violate that condition.
We kind of started out at a point with some of the discussion about Mexico Lindo that the HOA should be measuring what the recording is. And we've had the same thing out along Highway 49. The person complaining needs to be able to measure what it, to me, that's the wrong answer. You ought to be able to measure it in real time out on the site and know what it is. If the owner is willing to do that, that's great. And that can be a function of the conditional use permit. That's probably where you try to impose that if you recognize that that's a need, but that hasn't been done largely in the past. There was a big learning experience with Poor Reds. So.
Chrissy, I was at that meeting, the Montano meeting with the Planning Commission. And I do remember them agreeing, the builder agreed to have his own security sweep that area to make sure that it was safe. Okay, I would ask John Wagner if he has a recording of that, if the recording was made of that meeting.
We have
and that,
recordings. You don't need to ask Vania for a recording. It's
you
out
know,
there.
so
on
that
Legistar.
might be
It's on the
sufficient.
website.
That might be sufficient proof to bring it back to Vinyl Perkins and say, you agreed to this.
Right, I mean, I emailed him.
Okay, that's all I have to say. But I have one question to Supervisor Heidel. You mentioned communities of interest. Would Four Seasons and Heritage be considered communities of interest? And how would they go about making that known?
They would want to express that to the surveyor's office. That's really what the first two meetings that the county held were all about, is getting inputs on community of interest. What do you think are communities of interest? I think the public in general didn't understand what the meaning of that was. There is a really good definition of what communities of interest can include that was put out by a CSAC presentation they made that I always go back to and say, here it is. Here's the priority listing of things in terms of what you're supposed to do for redistricting. And that's what I'm going to keep reminding the surveyor's office of, is these are the things that the state has said we have to do. And we don't seem to have gotten there yet. So maybe it's just we have to figure out what the combinations are to make all that happen. So
should these two communities then apply to the surveyor's office and say, yes, we are communities of interest?
I would recommend that,
Okay.
because then you go on
All right, that's
record.
what I wanted to know.
And I think it's probably better to submit it in writing. So it is a matter of record, but if you want to voice that at the meeting tomorrow night, I think it's going to be open for those kinds of inputs. Right. And I think I've shared with John and Tim what the actual communities of interest definition was by the presentation. So there's a whole page that starts with the federal, right? The federal government's only worried about two basic things: equality and population, for each of the districts. And then what happens relative to segregation, all the race stuff, all of that. That's what the federal government's interested in. But then the state, AB, I think it's 843, has a prioritized list of things that have to occur with redistricting. The first one is contiguity that has to be contiguous. You can't have a piece of a district here and a piece of a district, same district in another place. So it has to be contiguous in terms of its boundaries. And then the second is communities of interest. And they also call that neighborhoods of commonality or communities of interest, to try to make sure people understand the terminology. But there's a specific slide in that deck that says, here's the things you should consider as communities of interest. And certainly any HOA, a recognized retirement community, Lennar Heritage, all those things to me are individual communities of interest. So, yeah.
The reason why you would want to be a community of interest is that you couldn't partition those individuals and redistrict them outside of that community.
You can, but it's to be discouraged. I mean, obviously with equal population, if we had a huge city, if El Dorado Hills was a huge city, we couldn't have all the city of El Dorado Hills maintained because we have to divide it in two, right? So there are things that you can't avoid with that. Cities, they're trying to say one of the criteria is maintain a city boundary within a given district and don't split it up. And now there are cases where you'd have to split it up, right? But yeah, so there's like,
compact maps and keeping it, yeah,
Right.
commonality is the big deal, so.
Right.
Okay, so I'm looking, I don't see anybody online with their hand up, so, well, thank you, Supervisor Heidel.
Yep.
Can I ask one?
Oh, yeah, go ahead, go
personal
ahead.
one?
Can you grab the microphone? There you go, press the-
There's a lot of work being done on the freeway right at the entrance ramp at night. I was just curious, it shines right into our house. What are they doing?
talking about El Rose Boulevard and Highway
Yeah.
50.
Yeah,
It'd be a Caltrans project, and I don't know what they may be doing. That wasn't announced by any of the meetings I've been in.
it's weird. It starts at about 8 o'clock at night, and goes to about 3 in the morning.
Is there a lot of noise with it, or is it pretty quiet?
Lots of noise, floodlights, back, like.
Well, they have all the materials.
Have you heard anybody
Yeah.
complaining about that? I haven't.
down there. But it would just be nice, because the lights are situated where it floods right back into Crescent Ridge and Park. So
Hmm.
it's pretty.
I can give you a contact at Caltrans to call, who's our representative for El Dorado County, to talk to them and find out what the project is. I mean, I can give that to you. I don't know if Cindy's got it, the Caltrans contacts, but we can get it to you.
Thank you. And then one last follow-up, what were the reasons why that FEMA denied? Generally speaking?
It's on the margin relative to numbers of structures lost. I was told that typically 1,000 is kind of that boundary. And in one accounting, we had 1,003. In another accounting, it depends on how much damage is considered to be the total structure loss versus partial loss. So I guess we were right in that marginal range. And that was the criteria, I guess, that was the significant part of what FEMA's decision was. Although we haven't seen a written response. But that's the conjecture I've heard, is that we were on the boundary with respect to number of structures lost, and that may have been one of the reasons. So I don't know.
We lost about 790 primary residences.
I think it
When
says
you say structures, that includes sheds, outbuildings,
no,
barns.
those are recorded differently by the numbers that U.S. Forestry Service collects.
Yeah.
So these were actual inhabitable structures. Now, some of them are trailers, right? So you don't talk about a house, right? But they're inhabitable structures is what I understand was the 1,003 number. And then there were sheds and other outbuildings that were recorded in a different category. But the bottom line is, it seems like we were right at that borderline. And so FEMA decided to recommend disapproval of the request. Whatever else goes into that, I mean, I'm sure it's really political, right?
Then just follow up to that, is the county gonna adopt any emergency planning submittal process for rebuilds for people? Anything that residents should be aware of?
One of the things that the county is doing is trying to revise a lot of the current ordinances for building that would remove the lengthy process, get things streamlined. One of the things that I think most people, a lot of people know about, is that if people are willing to wait to have their property remediated from the standpoint of hazardous materials, Cal OES will do that for those structures that were identified to be a total loss at zero cost. The big if is when they get it done, right? Because they only have so many contractors that come in and do it. But to me, that's the right way to do it, because you get a clean bill of health from the state. And now if you're trying to sell the property because you want to move and somebody else might want to buy it, they want to know they're not buying into something they got to spend a lot of money clean up after the fact, right? So I would think it'd be valuable from a real estate perspective. But we have heard stories about people who cashed out on their insurance who were up in Grizzly Flat and they're already out of state. and they have no intent of doing anything but leaving that mess for the county. So that's probably going to be some of the recovery funds, is we're going to have to spend some money to clean things up on property that wasn't dealt with by the current owners. And then they don't pay taxes. So you lien the property and then there's an auction. It involves a lot of county activity, which takes time and money. So unexpected consequences, I suppose, but anyway, go.
So here we go. I'm gonna get back to sharing this screen here and get it back into a fashion where everybody can see the, sorry. Okay, so tonight, we're essentially reviewing what we look at as APAC and how the community can help participate, or how, if you want to do on your own, some of the things that we do when we're evaluating projects and when we're exploring it. And keep in mind, we're all volunteers. We do this for fun. No, really, it's a sense of, trying to do something for our community and try to be consistent with how, we grow. So we're going to get underway here. And the first thing we're going to talk about is Sequa, the California Environmental Quality Act. So basically any project undertaken by a public agency, which includes school districts and state agencies, special districts like the CSC, the fire department, public college or university, those are, the Sequa applies. Sequa applies to discretionary projects undertaken by private parties. A discretionary project, I'm going to read it here, is one that requires the exercise of judgment and deliberation by a public agency to determine whether the project will be approved or if a permit will be issued. Discretionary projects include placing conditions on the issuance of a permit, conditions of approval, essentially. Are we allowed that there, Mike? Oh, there we go. Thank you. And so basically it's something that has to be considered by a legislative body, which in our county is the Board of Supervisors. So Sequa does not apply to ministerial projects. A ministerial project is something that only requires you to be compatible with an ordinance or a standard, something that's a fixed objective measure, and doesn't require really any consideration by a public official other than essentially in our county, the director of the planning department. So examples that they include for ministerial projects, something that only needs a permit, something that's simple like a roof replacement, and alterations to the interior home where you don't change the footprint of the home, landscape changes. And also there are some, as an example, the Saratoga retail phase 2, they had a plan development approved and they came back when they wanted to add the drive-through features there. And the applicant's determination was, well, this is just ministerial. We have a project approval. We can already do this. And at the time, the planning department said, no, this is significant enough that it's not ministerial. We really need to take a look at it, look at the environmental impact, which we were happy they did, because we're hearing a lot about it even now with the changes to the project. All day today, I think there's a social media message about the circulation in the parking lot or outside the Starbucks and how it's going out onto Saratoga. It was backing up onto El Dorado Boulevard today, just trying to get through and get into that parking lot. So we thought it was a problem. Apparently, it is a problem, but it was an approved project. So moving along. So the other thing about Sequa is that it requires each county establish a planning agency. In our county, we have a planning department, but the review authority, the review board that provides recommendations to our Board of Supervisors is our planning commission. And those are appointed commissioners appointed in each district by our supervisors. And they review the projects and make recommendations. They can make a recommendation to approve a project as it's presented. They can recommend that it be modified in some fashion, and they pass that recommendation on to the Board of Supervisors. So they could recommend that it be denied. But the Board of Supervisors is the ultimate authority on all projects. So Planning Commission can recommend denial, Board of Supervisors can approve it. Planning Commission can recommend approval, and the Board of Supervisors can deny it. So it's the legislative body that makes the ultimate determination on these projects. So, and then as part of this for Sequa, there's the planning department looks at things for Sequa. When the initial review, they want to make a determination if it's going to require an environmental impact report, or if they could get by with a negative declaration or a mitigated negative declaration. And that's essentially a finding before they present it to the public, saying, hey, we don't think there are essentially any environmental impacts of concern. the exception being a mitigated negative declaration is when they know their impacts, but they can adopt mitigation measures to curtail them or reduce them to less than significant. Jump ahead. So I went too far, sorry. I'm on it, sorry. There we go. I'm looking at two screens, right? So for the mitigated negative declaration, you have to make a good faith effort to determine if there's any substantial evidence that the project would result in any significant environmental effect. They have to incorporate effective revisions or mitigation measures. Then they have to circulate it, but prior to circulating it to the public. And there has to be evidence and record to support those findings by the agency. So with that, we're going to move ahead. And tonight, we're lucky. Here we go. Let's see, make sure I have all this over here. Would you like to go ahead and, there's a microphone there. If you press a button on it, it turns green. And now, Marty, you're able to talk. Will you introduce yourself and give us just like a quick review of why we're turning to you tonight? And we're grateful that you're here.
Thanks very much. John invited me here tonight, I think, because I spent 35 years writing EIRs. That was my career, basically, and got to retire to El Dorado Hills. So I have a lot of experience in the Sequa process. And John, actually, you did have my first 5 minutes for me, thank you. But the flow chart we had up on the screen there.
I thought there was a, there we go.
Well, it's very hard to read, I guess. But
Yeah, I broke it into two. If you want me to go ahead and, is that a little easier to look at?
yeah, I'm sure it is. Basically, when a project, I think what I'll try to do tonight is just stick to not get into the weeds with public projects and everything else. Just what happens when a private applicant wants to do something, wants to build something, develop something in a community that has a lead agency. And here we know it's the lead agency for projects in El Dorado Hills is El Dorado County. And their implementing agency is the planning department. And so we have, for example, now this project, there's the one on Bass Lake Road that I'm not really that familiar with, but the EDH 52 project, which is coming right up, is in my backyard. And so I'm more familiar with that. What happens there is that the public agency accepts an application. They determine that the application is complete. They issue what is called a notice of preparation. And in El Dorado County, they have a pretty generous standard for the distribution of that notice. Under the state guidelines, you only have to notify basically concerned agencies and adjacent property owners. But in El Dorado County, they have to notify everybody within a mile of the site that is proposed to be developed. So a lot of us got notice. I understand from the city or the county planner and the planning department, Gina Hamilton, that they received 33 letters of comment on the notice of preparation for EDH 52. So now what happens is the county in the meantime has hired a consultant. The county staff is stretched way too thin to do every EIR that comes along. So the county enters a contract typically with the consultant, like the company I used to work for, to prepare the EIR basically. And so the consultant, in consultation with the staff and in consultation with various lead agencies, in consultation with anybody they think they need to talk to or deal with in order to prepare a legally adequate document, they go off and basically prepare it with their own staff. So in our case, the company I worked for instance, we had employees who were experts, I mean, were PhDs on down in virtually every field that has anything to do with the environment, the physical environment. Sequa only deals with the physical conditions of a project. So in an EIR, you don't have to look at, you can, but you don't have to look at social impacts, environmental, or I mean, economic impacts, unless they relate to a physical impact. I could get in the weeds there, I'm sure. But in any case, so the consultant does this. And according to Gina, the schedule now, the next step, if you will, well, the next step for the consultant and the staff is to prepare an administrative draft, which is not a public document, but it's something that the consultants will prepare. It's their best first shot at doing an adequate, legally adequate environmental impact report, but it's only for internal review. And so the county staff and the consultants and whoever they want to involve can go through that. They have as much time. There's no time limit on this exactly. The overall, Sequa wants you to finish an EIR in a year. Gina says they hope to have the draft EIR up for EDH 52 out in the summer, but there's no drop dead date by any means.
Marty, you keep referring to EDH 52. For those who may not know, EDH 52 and Costco are going through the same EIR process at the same time.
Yes.
So if you're hearing EDH 52 and you're wondering what that is part of the Costco project.
Yeah, there are two major sites for this project. The Costco site, which is referred to as the south site, closest to Highway 50, just off Silver Valley Parkway. And then on the other side of Silver Valley Parkway, the site that's referred to as the north site is another, I think, 30 acres or so, which is a much more sort of amorphous project. It's not a Walmart and it's not a Costco. It's a parcelization of that acreage, dividing it up with property lines going here and there, which will result in some 7 different parcels. The developer, it's the same property owner for each site. And so the point I had tried to make from the beginning is that these are really 2 separate projects. They don't depend on each other in any way. The only thing they have in common is the same owner of the site, but they're absolutely distinct projects, except that they're both commercial.
Actually, Marty, I think Costco did buy these 20 acres or so.
Oh,
the
did
south
they?
side. Yeah, I
Okay.
believe there's 2 separate ownerships now.
But they're still tied into the same one EIR.
I believe the rationale is, as I understand it, is because when they're both built out to whatever plan, the EIR, the traffic issues, and some of the other issues will be very similar. Wetland issues, stream issues, and stuff like that.
Well, yes, there's
Yeah.
the wetlands
There's a
fill.
commonality, and it made sense for them to apply as one project, and the county has accepted that rationale and is treating it as one project.
Costco has not bought the property yet. They're waiting for
They have an agreement to purchase it based on the outcome of the.
It's not yet based on the outcome.
There's been a lot of confusion over that, so don't, yeah.
And I did acknowledge you when you came in the room. Thank you, Neff, for being here tonight. We appreciate you being in person.
I guess we're getting specific already, but that's
Well,
okay.
It's a good example.
I did comment on the notice of preparation, 5 single-spaced pages. And I tried to focus on giving the county, I don't want to call it advice, but suggestions on what to do in the EIR. They weren't intended to be comments on the projects, either project themselves, but how the EIR should be composed. And my first and major point was in my 35 years of writing EIRs, a major lesson that I learned, and I learned early, is that when you try to combine 2 projects into one EIR, the problems of one become the problems of the other. And you get a lot of confusion, a lot of agony on the part of everybody concerned, except the lawyers who get paid by the hour. So, in any case, that comment, I think, just sailed past the decision makers, and so we're going to get one EIR on these 2 very distinct projects. So where were we? Okay, so the next thing that's happening, the consultants are preparing the administrative draft EIR. The county staff will consult with them, and sometime, presumably next summer, everyone will agree that they have a draft EIR that is suitable for public release. And when that happens, there'll be I guess we can find it on here.
On the next, yeah, sorry.
A notice of completion is what it's called. which lets everybody know that the draft EIR is out for public review. You'll have, the minimum is 30 days unless it goes to the state clearinghouse, the Office of Planning and Research in the state, because it circulates the EIR to any state agencies that are involved. And invariably that'll happen with this project for sure. So there'll be a 45-day review period to receive public comments. Now, Sequa, the state law and the state guidelines don't require a public hearing on the draft EIR. They make sure you have plenty of opportunity to submit written comments. I don't know, now the county has its own guidelines, and I'm not familiar with them at all, except for the wrinkle that has had to deal with transportation significance, traffic significance. But they may have a requirement for a public hearing. The public hearing on the notice of preparation, which was virtual, we had to phone it in or electronically communicate. We had 3 minutes to comment, and on a project of that scope, it's unreal to think that you can cover what you have to say in 3 minutes, and it will be even more unreal if that's what happens with the draft EIR. But so it's very important, if you do have comments on the draft EIR and for reasons, and you have reasons to believe that it is legally inadequate, incomplete, or has some fatal flaw, you better get it in writing, because 3 minutes isn't going to be enough to express yourself in full, if there is, in fact, even a public hearing at all. So at that point, there becomes kind of two strategies. Or if you are opposed to the project, and this is, Sequa gets a lot of criticism for this and has forever, and everybody's trying to reform it in a way, or there's a lot of agitation about reforming Sequa so that it can't just be used to obstruct or delay a project. But the fact is that it requires a legally adequate environmental impact report before it can be approved. And so if you have objections to the quality of the EIR, to its adequacy or completeness and its objectivity, you need to put those comments in writing, and you need to submit them during the review period, and you have to be on record of doing that. Otherwise, you're not going to ever be able to sue, take it to court, because you have to exhaust your administrative remedy. You have to make your comments known on the draft EIR. You can't just go straight to court when you don't like the results. So you have to exhaust your administrative remedy, and you have to really be attentive to there's a lot of value, in a way, to just expressing your outrage at the project in your comments on the EIR. That gets through to the decision makers, John, right? I mean, even if the comments aren't relative to the actual content of the requirements, the legal requirements of the document, it's a way for the public to express itself on what it thinks of not only the EIR, but what it thinks of the project. And so as long as there's a substantive core of comments that go to the adequacy of the EIR, there is a basis for challenging it. And at that point, it can become a negotiation. We have, for instance, a project we did in Emeryville, a big biotech long-range development plan. And there were various parties of interest, huge project. And there were like six entities withstanding who threatened to challenge the EIR in court. Well, guess what? For instance, one of them is the Plumbers and Steam Fitters Union. Well, what they wanted to get was union contracts in the construction of the project. So they threatened to sue unless they got union contracts, promise of union contracts. And when they got that promise, the threat of suit went away. So there is an interval in there. If you have a record of substantive comments with a basis in law, a legal basis to find the EIR inadequate, it can be a negotiating chip. So if there are aspects of the project that you'd like to see changed, the way it works is you threaten to sue the EIR unless you get what you want. It's a negotiation. It becomes a negotiation. That's just the fact of life.
Marty, I want to sort of bring back what you said to see how, and tie it into how we operate here at APAC. The 45-day comment period. We found that county planning and most of the developers have been allowed us additional time. You can request additional time.
Yeah.
And we've done that for the old golf course. We've done it for the town center apartments. We've done it for other projects that APAC has reviewed. And that's got us either another 15 or 30 additional days. When you're talking about volunteer members from the community and APAC members and those who want to talk about or work on a particular project, we're volunteers. We're not experts in traffic or acoustics or fish and game or all the other things that the project Sequa review requires. So we get in there, we do our best. We will, APAC, a subcommittee will be formed. We'll get a voting member to work with that subcommittee or 2 voting members to help guide them along the process, how to make an effective comment on an EIR, get it in, get it approved by the APAC at a voting membership at a meeting, and then getting it in on time. So that's probably the most important thing that we can do as a community is get the community's comments reflected in a document. So it's a written record and that goes forth.
It's common that comment periods get extended. And 45 days is the minimum.
Yeah.
The SQL guidelines say, well, they could be extended by agreement with the agreement of the applicant to 60 and even 90 days in exceptional circumstances. I think SQL says, the state law says 90 days is all you got to get the comments in 90 days. So I believe that's kind of the way the rules work for as far as the state's concerned.
Add the legal perspective to that. You forego or you waive arguments that aren't put into the comments for purposes of appeal. So that's how important it is to make sure you've addressed all of the grounds for challenging the report, because that is what you're bound to or
If you do choose, eventually there is a suit. Causes of action can't be anything that haven't been raised already by whoever's filing the suit. So you have to cover all your bases going in. That's correct. So there we are. You get the EIR goes out, the draft EIR goes out for public review, comments come in. Meanwhile, whatever's happening behind closed doors happens behind closed doors. And the applicant may make some changes to his project. Threatened challenges may go away or may not. And when the comment period closes, the staff of the county and the consultants take the comments and they prepare a final EIR. And a final EIR can take different forms, but basically it has to respond to all of the comments received on the draft EIR that raise a significant or raise an environmental issue. It can't just be complaints or whatever. If somebody objects to,
Yeah, and typically in the final, the county planning department and the consultant will always say, they'll acknowledge the comment and they'll say it doesn't have an
yes, the
environmental.
comment doesn't address an environmental issue, comment acknowledged, next question, that's the way it works.
I have a question. When you talk about the adequacy, could you say that something has been left out of the EIR? For example, if people are concerned about the safety of the children in that adjacent school,
Oh, yes, sure.
can that be put in?
Oh, yeah. You actually, maybe you go to the next slide, John. we can come back to this discussion.
On the checklist.
Checklist, yeah. So the Sequa guidelines, by the way, if any of you really want to get into this, there's every year, there are revisions to the guidelines, there's new laws, there's court decisions, there's change, the legislature makes changes. And you can order annually, this is the latest one, and even it hasn't quite caught up to all the most recent revisions, but it's a very good guide. It's, I think, total of 420 pages and 10 pages short of the county general plan, I think, 430. But in any case, you can order it from, I can give you email to order it if you wish. The California Association of Environmental Professionals will sock you $30 for it, and you can get it. Actually, I just ordered one before I got a free one, so it wound up costing me $40.08 with postage and handling. But this is everything right as up to date as you're going to find. There is an appendix to the guidelines, the Sequa guidelines, which is called Appendix G, and this is the first or second page of that. And you can see across the top there the basic topics that an EIR needs to address. And there are a lot of the Appendix G goes on for 16 more pages, clarifying and suggesting criteria for determining significance and so forth. But if there is something that appears in the required contents of an EIR in the guidelines or in the statute that an EIR does not address, that's a lack of adequacy. That makes it inadequate. There are a number of things that can do that. One of the things too, by the way, in this case is an EIR has to address the whole of the action. You can't do an EIR in part of a project and then hope to tag on something later on. You need to address the whole thing. In this case, by the way, I think one of my comments on the EDH 52 project was the applicants thought, well, we don't really want to apply for our sign code exceptions. Not a lawyer, by the way, but it has to address the whole of the action. They are asking for exceptions to the height, location, area of their signs. And I think what they're saying in their own project description is they don't want to apply for that application yet. So I think that's another point that we'll have to look for. I'm looking forward to reviewing the draft EIR, of course, but to make sure that they cover their signage.
Yeah, we've seen in most commercial projects that there's always a sign package in there just stating they're typically in compliance with the county sign ordinances. And if they're asking for a very,
Exceptions.
yeah, then yeah. So I know the planning commission is really good about looking at that. I mean, those conversations go deep sometimes. So,
Yeah, well,
so this is a little different. So another point that maybe we should, when people are responding to the draft, specifically on that project, that should be an issue that we raise.
well, as long as I think that there'll be a few of us at least that are looking for that kind of stuff. So what happens is then the consultant and the county staff prepare responses to all those comments that they receive. They have a substance, environmental substance, and they prepare a response to comments document. And that can just be an addendum to the draft EIR, and then together they can constitute what is called the final EIR. That's it. They can also revise the draft EIR, making the corrections or the revisions that the comments have called for, or do both. But one way or the other, the final EIR needs to respond to all the comments that relate to environmental issues. And that's it. Then they distribute that according to, there's no more opportunity for public comment. As I said, there's no there's no requirement in the state guidelines of law for there to even be a public hearing. I don't know if the county has a requirement. Do they, John?
County does have a public, and the important part to me is look at what mitigation measures came with the conditions of.
Oh,
the
for
final
sure.
EIR.
Yeah, yeah.
What is it they're doing to try to modify the conditions such that they're not as extreme as they would be? And that, you can't eliminate traffic and that sort of thing, but you can have requirements for deceleration lanes, expanded roadways, wider shoulders, whatever it is. So those, the mitigation measures are real important to look at in that final EIR.
I should cover that real quickly. The general contents of the EAR, you have to have a summary, you have to have a project description that is complete and describes everything about the project that could affect the environment. And it also has to contain a statement of the project's objectives. What are the sponsor's objectives of this project? The next chapter, if you will, is the environmental setting. What is the setting, the environmental setting in which this project is proposed to take place? So you look at all these issues at the top of the screen. What are the conditions at the time of the notice of preparation? If there's no notice of preparation, well, there will be a notice. There has been a notice of preparation. So there's a notice of preparation. So it's the date of the notice of preparation that the project settings, or the environmental setting is supposed to describe. Then you go to the environmental impact section. Well, with the project that you read in the project description and the environmental setting you read about, what are going to be the environmental impacts of this project? And are any of them significant? Well, what's significant? Significant is a substantial adverse change in the physical conditions in the area affected by the project. That's what a significant impact is. And if there is a significant impact, if the project is proposed, it's required to include mitigation measures. What do you do to mitigate those impacts, to reduce, a way to reduce those impacts? There are no physical impacts, no feasible mitigation measures that will mitigate those impacts to less than significant levels. What you have is an unavoidable significant impact.
And air quality is the best example of that, because we live in a region where we get a lot of the smog coming out of Sacramento that sits in El Dorado County, so.
You have a cumulative air quality
Yes,
condition.
well said, yes, but that's one of the significant and unavoidable I've seen in a lot of these
Yeah.
EIRs. It's just, what do you do about it, right? You can't put a big fan up there to blow it out, so.
Yeah, but a significant one that can be mitigated is when construction starts and they're moving a lot of dirt. One of the conditions of approval for that will be that they spray water on the dirt to keep the dust down. And this is important here because we have a spot right over here called Asbestos Ridge. We know that El Dorado County is lots of asbestos. So having that requirement that they keep the dust levels down, but that's a requirement. It's the enforcement of it when the construction starts that becomes a bigger issue.
Right, well, so that particular case is the air quality management district. And they said, fugitive dust.
Yeah.
There's a definition for all those
Yeah.
things, so.
And
Those are
typically,
the conditions on the project.
there's a fugitive dust mitigation plan
measure. Yep,
included with
yep.
each project. So,
Water
and in terms of the asbestos, the county does have an asbestos ordinance standard plan, and typically it's, you don't disturb it, or you water it, or you bury it. And so,
We're experiencing that right now because they've just begun grading on the project you just approved. A couple doors down our street.
14.
Yeah.
14, yeah.
I don't know if they had their grading permit when they started grading, because it was record time if they did, but in any case, they're spraying, but this has been windy days and that, it doesn't.
Yeah, I'm right by J7, and my solar panels are full of dust as soon as I'm done hosing them off.
Yeah,
So, yeah.
One of my comments on the notice of preparation is to quantify the amount of dust that will be left on our solar panels in our backyards and our playgrounds. Anyway.
I have a question for you.
Sure.
How would you advise someone who wants to write on a particular item on the draft EIR? what would you tell them to focus? What should they focus on? You know, not just say, I don't like it, okay? So what should their focus be?
I think the best place to start is where, as I said, there's an appendix G in this document. There's an appendix G to the SQL guidelines that is a checklist of what the EIR needs to address. Basically, it's a simplified version of, you know, what you have to include in the EIR in order for it to be adequate. That's where I would start. It covers all these topics. It tells you, you know, for your EIR to be adequate, for instance, in covering the issues on air quality, top right. Here's what it should do. I could read it to you, but I won't do it. But start with Appendix G of the SQL guidelines, and when you read the draft EIR, does the draft EIR address everything point by point? By the way, this Appendix G is in alphabetical order, which I never thought was a very good way to tell the story, but we don't really write them in alphabetical order so much. It's more like starting with the planning context and getting into the land use, and then you want to do traffic before you do air quality, because traffic leads into air quality and blah blah blah. So, but in any case, I would start with Appendix G.
Now, if you do find something in that appendix that is in the draft EIR, okay, what would you recommend to people who want to answer or approach that particular thing in the draft EIR? For example, air quality, okay, it's there, okay. What should people focus on if they want to address that particular thing?
Well, okay, the EIR should answer the question: would the project cause a violation of any greenhouse gas control plan, or ambient air quality standard, and if the EIR should show you, go through step by step, how the project relates to every regulation, every standard of relating to air quality that project has is relevant to that project. And if it does it in a convincing way, I mean, we're not all air quality experts, meteorologists, so, you know, if it needs to do it in a credible way, it has to provide substantial evidence in the record, that it has to cite its sources, it has to, you know, it has to be credible, you know, but it has to cover what Appendix G says it should cover. And if it doesn't, then there may be other things. I mean, there still may be other. Appendix G isn't totally comprehensive of everything an EIR should really be doing necessarily, but it's a very good place to start.
And what we've done as volunteers is that whoever's working on a subcommittee, if they have a specific interest, they have a concern, they have a sort of an affinity for transportation, there's, you know, they doubt sort of what's in there. That's where we said, well, if you're interested in that, go look at it, and then start, and we'll show us what you're talking about, and we'll go back and forth and help you make a determination. You know, is this something that's viable? Should we be addressing it? And if we don't know, then we'll put it in. But that's as a cooperative group, that's usually how we do it, right? So, but yeah, it's a lot of things to look at, and none of us are experts.
Guidelines encourage during the preparation of the administrative draft EIR, let alone the draft EIR, lead agencies, staff consults with the responsible agencies. There are other agencies that have to approve a project. The water district has to say, well, as far as water supply, we either have a problem or we don't, you know, or it's not that simple, but.
Historically, since the water moratorium back in the 80s, we have enough water, is what we always hear, so.
Yeah, right.
So, and we'll leave that at that, but that's another conversation.
But I guess what I was trying to get at is,
Yeah,
it's okay that the staff of the lead agency, the planning department, Gina Hamilton and whoever else she's working with at the planning department, they'll consult with representatives of the responsible public agencies. And Sequa encourages them to talk with the privates, whoever's interested from the private side too. It's not like at the moment, the notice, the comment period on the notice of preparation ends, the public goes away. I mean, and the next chance we get is to see is when the draft EIR comes out. Sequa encourages to have access to the staff, to let our concerns be known, you can comment you can send Gina Hamilton an email anytime you want. And she's very nice, by the way. She responded to me Monday morning in a heartbeat.
She is very responsive, yes.
So
I think the question that you were getting at was more, so you have a draft report and the draft report's purpose is to get certified or to get approved. So somebody looking at the report and deciding how to attack the report or whether or not they agree with the findings.
the purpose, not draft EIR is what gets certified. It's the final EIR that's certified.
Fair
It's
enough.
the draft EIR that is put into the public realm for comment, to receive comment. And also from all the agencies too, public agencies.
That's the important part. Typically, there's 20 agencies or more.
Yeah,
The consultant, the fire department always has inputs to the conditions to get approved in the final plan after the Sequa and everything else happens. So a lot of eyes on it from the standpoint of not only the public, but agencies that are directly impacted by what that growth is.
Yeah, so I may have phrased it improperly, but I think what people were what the question was trying to get at is a concerned citizen that's looking at a draft report and they're looking at a category within the report, such as the air quality. What do they look at to see if that draft provision that is summarizing the air quality impacts of the project, how do they know whether that is sufficient or not? What is the resource or what are they supposed to look at and challenge?
it's very hard if you're just a typical lay person and you're not an air quality expert or a meteorologist. All you can do is look at what the guidelines require and does the draft EI apparently satisfy those requirements. If there are obvious gaps or deficiencies, well, you can call those out readily, but every member of the public isn't a technical expert on every aspect of every EIR. So at some point you give it your best shot. You hope that there are enough people paying attention that somebody out there knows, cares, makes a comment that needs a response.
So the starting point though, because I think I might answer my own question, but everything is codified, correct? For the requirements for the Sequa.
Well, there's a lot of discretion. I mean, it's not as though every criterion for determining significance is a quantitative. You can arrive at it mathematically. There's a lot of subjectivity in determining what's a significant effect in some cases. Now, there are air quality standards that are very quantifiable, and the consultant that's the expert makes the projection. Will this project violate a standard or not? And it's a number. But many impacts are not like that.
Right, and I'm taking you up to the 20,000 foot view. I'm just saying Sequa itself is codified in, oh gosh, what is it? It's the public resource code, right?
Yes.
Okay, so if people wanted to educate themselves on what the requirements are, they could start there for the different areas, right? Okay, and then you can look at how, because sometimes the annotated versions of the public code will walk you through what recent decisions are interpreting that provision.
This book does that.
Perfect. I want to give people a roadmap as to when they're looking at these projects, what can they do in real time that has some meaning and value to the process and feel like their voice is being heard. And I think it's a good starting point to turn to, well, go to the public code, look at what the code says, and then look at what the draft EIR says with regard to that provision, and then interpret it. And you can interpret it on your own. You can have your own subjective interpretation of it. It's not an objective standard, correct? It is totally subjective. And I think that would really help us in doing our analysis on the project basis to get some substance from the public. It helps.
Well, this book is first half of it is the statute itself, and the second half are the implementing guidelines, which I think legislatively have been implementing guidelines for the statute. That is, the guideline, you can rely on the guidelines as if you comply with the guidelines, you've complied with the statute. And this is all online. You don't even have to spend $40.08 to get a copy.
It is a complex subject, though. You'll spend tons of time just trying to understand, scratching your head, where did they come up with that? I mean, it's not obvious where some of the provisions related to Sequa came from until you really dig into it, and get the understanding of the breadth and depth that's involved with it. I mean, it's also the reason why the cost of building in the county is probably 50% more than it needs to be compared to the state of Texas, okay? Land values all being different stuff. So there is a cost to all of this, but you do get a much higher quality product, I believe.
And the devil's in the details. I mean, unfortunately, these draft environmental impact reports, they're going to be a minimum of 200 pages. The old golf course one, I think it was 1,700 pages, and then they did a few more. So it's probably over 2,000 pages now. You have to be willing to dig into it. As John said, we can divide these up by these topics that are up here, and people have an interest in traffic or air quality or history and Native American issues. They can get into that, but you really have to read the details. I did the air quality stuff for the old golf course, and boy, so many, it was beyond my high school chemistry, put it that way, with some of those things, but I tried to get into it. I saw things that made no sense to me, and you had to raise a question. I don't understand this. Why are you referring to some environmental impact report for the Bay Area and applying it to El Dorado County? Because there's two different things. But they did that, and I called it out, and they answered it. But basically, you have to raise every question ad infinitum, throw it up against a wall, and see what sticks.
That's
I
a
mean,
good point.
we're probably not going for lawsuits. Lawsuits are actually for, unless we start volunteering and raising money to hire a lawyer, that's not what we're trying to get to here. But we are trying to do a good record, get our concerns noted, whether they're Sequa related or non-Sequa related, and get them out there so that the planning commission can hear them, and then ultimately the board of supervisors hears them and makes a decision.
It's a good point, though, by the way. I didn't mean to suggest that your comments on the draft EIR should always be challenges to the adequacy of it. They can be asking questions. You ask questions.
Exactly.
You want to get answers to your questions.
Right. Explain why this was referenced as
So if
appropriate record or reference, to this type of a situation. And they have to respond to all those things. Now, a lot of times they'll lump things together and you'll get a response to.
See
that's so big,
response,
you try to read
yeah.
through all that and figure out where your response is, but it's in there somewhere, right?
Yeah.
The other important thing I think we need to recognize is with the recent changes in Sequa, if your interest is transportation, you're not going to get that relative to the level of service out of the Sequa document. That's not going to be mentioned. That's a separate county general plan requirement.
We'll touch that here in a few
That
minutes.
analysis is totally different.
It's interesting, though, Don. I read the county's ordinance. That was a new wrinkle because
Yes.
SB 743 was passed in 2013. So I had been retired for 5 years. So I just had to catch up on that. But I think the county implementing ordinance, this calls for the criterion for significance for traffic impacts to be vehicle miles traveled, no longer level of service. But in order to determine whether a project is consistent with the general plan, you still have to look at level of
And
service.
Natalie's kind of our expert lead in that. She's with us, so she can explain all the nuances of that. But it's twice the work for DOT, because they've got to not only look at the BMT, but they've also got to do the LOS analysis.
So it'll be interesting to see, I guess. I'm not a lawyer, as I said, but so if the LOS analysis finds a project inconsistent with the general plan, is the inconsistency with the general plan a significant impact?
It is, and we can.
So there you go. You need it in the EIR after all.
But how long that stays in the general plan with evolution and stuff, it's there today, but who knows if it'll continue to stay with the other trends that are going on. Hopefully, because I think the level of service is really what people are concerned about, is what's the delay of the traffic signal?
Yeah.
The thinking has all changed around about it, so where it's not the driver that's important anymore, it's how many miles you put on the road. How do you use the roadways, not what the effect is on the driver.
But I had a question on the NLP, by the way. What will be the change in travel time from the top of the eastbound Highway 50 off-ramp at Silva Valley to Serrano Valley Parkway with the impact, additional traffic impacts of what I would call two projects, this big project, and the two signals they're proposing to put in? What will I'm not asking about level of service, I'm just asking about what will change in the time of travel. So I don't know if they'll read that comment.
Analysis, but a lot is the answer.
You have a microphone? So, oh, yeah, that way, yeah.
So the question that you had, doesn't it matter in Sequa anymore? That doesn't matter in Sequa any longer, is how long it's gonna take you to get there. They just wanna know how far you're going.
Right.
It doesn't
Well, I
matter.
understand that.
You for that, I think.
It doesn't, they don't care. In fact, the law was written to increase it. They want it to make it so bad, you get out of your car and you walk or you ride a bike.
You can't take a bus in Silva Valley Parkway. can you?
Right, but
Offers transit system.
we've had these discussions with the state that it doesn't work for
Rural
rural, rural.
Yeah, I understand.
Highly metropolitan.
And
I get it.
pretty much the response was, we don't care.
Yeah.
So we've had these objections since 2013. We've kind of written them out as comments to SB 743 saying it really doesn't, we have a hard time meeting the expectations, because the whole point of it is supposed to be the reduction of greenhouse gases. And when you bring up the fact that, well, now we're idling more, so aren't you creating more greenhouse gases? Oh, that's fine.
Because the counter to that is that that engineering on vehicles and emissions is advanced so much that's really not applicable as it was 10 or 20 years ago.
That's the argument. So that they give us, okay. Yeah, we just have to figure where the power plant's going to be to make all that electricity, right? So.
With power in the power plant, how was that scrubbed?
Yeah, you can see why EIRs can get. See, the guidelines say they should normally not be more than 150, in exceptional cases, 300, but they're not supposed to be 2,000, 1,000 pages.
Well, Marty, we've taken a lot of your time tonight, and we have a couple of our members are online that are going to contribute some stuff tonight.
Oh, sure.
Is there anything else that you want to wrap up, or? I'd love to invite you back.
If there are questions, I don't.
Well, why don't we get through what we have, and if there's anything for questions, we'll come back to it. So thank you for doing that with us tonight. That's a lot of detail, and it's hard to get our heads around that. It's the topic of Sequa, and and draft environmental impact reports and the process. It's if you haven't done it a couple times, and I've done it a few, and you've done it a few, John's done a lot, I still you stumble when you're going through it.
But that's the key. It's incremental learning. You're not
Yeah.
going to be able to drink out of the fire hose and understand. Unless you want to spend a lot of time.
Yeah.
So.
Unfortunately, we do. So moving along. So quickly, transportation was the next thing. We probably don't even need to cover this. The law change for Sequa, looking at vehicle miles traveled as a standard, no longer use automobile delay measured by level of service, LOS, or any capacity or traffic congestion as the basis for determining significance of transportation impacts. That's for the Sequa part. However, as we've talked about tonight, there are these elements in our general plan, and we won't go over these tonight. A lot of people hang their hats on these, but even these are kind of hard to quantify. But the general plan has some very specific areas in policy, and some of them were were voter approved, that we have to adhere to LOS in terms of the general plan when we're reviewing projects. So we won't go through that tonight, but these slides will be available online for everyone later. But in terms of the general plan, and I'll ask John Richard to be ready. I'm going to call on you in a minute. I'm going to ask you to unmute. You're unmuted. Awesome. There's John. So the general plan, several elements of the general plan, policies, goals, ordinance, resolutions, amendments. John did a very good job for us when we were looking at the Central El Dorado Hills specific plan. And he did a lot of work comparing what was in the, well, actually in the final EIR, but and comparing that to what the general plan says, because a lot of the elements of the proposed specific plan and project would specify things that it's, you know, bolstering policies or goals or even resolutions in the general plan. And John did a lot of work to determine where we thought maybe that was lacking. So I'm gonna just stop right here, and then I'm gonna ask John. Thank you, John, for contributing your time tonight, and jump on in, and anything you want to share, let's hit it.
Okay, I'll try to stay pretty focused on it. What I'll do is kind of take a look at what the general plan is and what that means for the growth in the county, how it's implemented, and how we look at it in terms of, you know, analyzing consistency with the general plan. So I think, you know, the general plan, it's meant to be the blueprint for the physical growth in the county. So basically how land is developed. And it's meant to be on a timeline of about 20 years or so, 15 to 20 years. So it looks at all the elements related to physical growth. And I think, John, you had a slide that listed those elements. Do you have that?
Was it there?
Yeah, so it has a land use element, transportation, a housing element, and so on. And it also has a map. And the map really becomes very important. And the map identifies which areas, which parcels in the county are designated for various land uses. So for housing or open space or commercial land use. And that becomes very important because that often is the center of any general plan amendment that a developer might request. And general plans that are required by California law, we have to provide them. We have to update them periodically. And you know, another thing to keep in mind with general plans is that they are not written in stone. They're, like I mentioned, they're updated periodically, and then they can also be amended for specific projects. And I think that's where a lot of controversy surrounds specific, or not specific plans, but the general plan is when a developer wants to amend the plan to get a specific project approved. So in terms of how the general plan's implemented, really zoning is the main tool for implementing the general plan. So zoning ordinances, they overlay the general plan, and they have to be consistent, by law, they have to be consistent with the general plan. And they detail the very specific uses of each area of land. So the general plan is kind of like the big picture, the long-term plan, and then zoning details the immediate and specific allowable uses of the land in the county. And the general plan itself contains a matrix that identifies which zoning ordinances are consistent with which general plan designations. So that's an important bit of information because we can look at zoning or proposed zoning and say, gee, is that consistent with the general plan from a map standpoint, not necessarily from all these other elements, but from the map. And so for example, if the general plan map designates an area as a commercial area, you couldn't have zoning that allows residential in that area. It would be just inconsistent on the face of it. And so then to build residential in an area that the general plan map says is commercial, you would have to amend the general plan. And just like the general plan, zoning is not written in stone either. It can be changed. You know, for instance, the EDH 52 developers are asking for a down zone, or at least the latest information I have is that they're looking at a down zone from commercial regional to community commercial. And that's so they can build self-storage on that property that's allowed under community commercial, but not allowed under a commercial regional. It's a less intensive use, so it would be considered as a down zone. But that would be an example of changing zoning on a property, but that zoning change is still consistent with the general plan map. So that wouldn't require an amendment to the general plan. And then, you know, one other thing I'll touch on briefly, I think, is specific plans, because I've just seen a lot of confusion over what is a specific plan and why do we have them. And a specific plan is a plan that gets laid on top of the general plan. It replaces the zoning that would otherwise be in place in a given area. And usually it's for larger projects where you want to provide an integrated development plan with multiple uses. And it just becomes more flexible and better for the developer, and usually better for the community if the project is something the community wants. And so it also has to be consistent with the general plan. And so I'll get to that in just a minute in terms of how we look at consistency. But really how, I guess I'll just jump to that right now, is, you know, if we're looking at projects that are proposed, I think we could break them up into several categories. One would be a project that is consistent with zoning, with the existing zoning. And if that's the case, then usually the general plan is not a serious consideration, because we know that the zoning that's in place in this moment is consistent with the general plan. We've already determined that. I'm not aware of any outstanding issue with respect to existing zoning consistency. So given that that's the case, usually the general plan would not be an area of really that I would spend a lot of time analyzing. You know, you could look at some of the elements that John has up on the board there and say, gee, does the plan, even though it's consistent with the map and consistent with zoning, does it meet all the other items in those elements? And another type of project would be one where, like EDH 52, where you're looking at a zoning change, but not a general plan amendment. And again, it's kind of the same thing. It's that zoning, as long as it's consistent with the general plan, typically, not always, but usually you're not going to have a big issue with general plan consistency unless it's going against one of the other land use elements in some, you know, obvious fashion. So you could still look at those other elements. I think the area where it gets a little more interesting, though, is where a developer asks for a general plan amendment. And so, for instance, we have that with the golf course, with Parker wanting to change the general plan designation for the golf course from open space to residential. Well, it's really to a specific plan that contains residential. And when we look at that, typically the general plan amendment only changes the land use map portion of the general plan. So again, that would be with respect to the golf course as an example, that the amendment is to change the general plan map, but it doesn't change any of the other elements. And that's key, because the general plan has many elements, and it's important for us to review, if we're changing the map, how does that impact the other elements in the general plan? And, you know, in short, the way we find that out is kind of like some of the comments on the EIR, is it just involves a tremendous amount of reading and comparing the project to what's written in the general plan. And the general plan is organized in a format that states the goals in each element that's listed on the board there. You'll have goals, and then below that, there will be objectives of those goals. And then there will be policies that are meant to meet the objectives and achieve the goals that are laid out in the general plan. So we can take a look at each of those goals and the underlying objectives and policies and compare them to what the proposed project brings to the table. And as we're doing that, I think the overriding question is, how does the proposed development fit in with each of these goals, objectives, and policies? And sometimes the fact is that the project might further those goals and objectives. Other times, you know, it's going to be pretty clear that they're inconsistent. And so as we read through that, we take note of those consistencies or inconsistencies, and then, you know, basically at the end of the day, write a report based on that. And I think in terms of writing, the written comment that can be submitted either as part of the APAC report, or individuals can submit their own comments directly to the Planning Commission or Board of Supervisors. I think the important part there is to be very specific about it, to look at, to cite the part of the general plan that you're discussing. And then what I usually do is cite an objective or a goal that I think might be in conflict with the project, and then a paragraph or two on exactly why I think that there's a conflict there, that it's inconsistent with the general plan. Or, you know, it could be there's a project that we think, wow, it really does further the general plan. And so then that's an easier thing to write and to point out where it's furthering, say, our housing needs without you know, doing damage or going against other parts of the consistent plan. And, you know, as Brooke pointed out, these things are subjective. And so where I might find inconsistency, someone else might think they're consistent. And so on comments that are made, I think the more specific that I can be, or, you know, anyone else writing it, the more specific and the more concrete, the better. I think that leads to a better discussion about whether these things are consistent or inconsistent. And then I would say just finally on the general plan, the last bit is the general plan amendments. We have to keep in mind that they are discretionary. It's the Board of Supervisors is not required by any means to approve general plan amendments. And so this means that really the county and our community should be getting meaningful benefits associated with any general plan amendment. And so when I review something like this, that's what I have my eye on, is really, do the benefits to the community outweigh the costs? And, you know, what, for instance, on the golf course, APAC concluded that the benefits do not outweigh the costs. And usually the fact of the matter is that if you read through the general plan and compare it to the actual project that's being proposed, it becomes, I think, relatively obvious if there are big conflicts. You know, the general plan has these goals and the policies and objectives written into it, and the comparison, it can be tedious, but it starts making sense, you know. And if you read the APAC report that John put together on the golf course, I think what I'm talking about there becomes pretty obvious. We can cite specific areas of the general plan that are just not consistent with what's proposed. And so, but the fact is that sometimes you have projects that are consistent, and, you know, I won't get into examples of those because I haven't been involved directly in them, but that does happen, and it's great when that happens. So that's about it.
I appreciate you doing that. And the reason we asked John to do that, because he really did a very detailed job on that, specifically on the central project, because, you know, we were looking at it, we were all looking at so many different elements, and John was very concise with comparing what was proposed in the project to what the general plan says, and finding those examples that we felt, you know, weren't compatible or were inconsistent at best. And that's not to say that we're right and somebody else is wrong, or, you know, we could be wrong, but we raise those questions and we try to get those questions answered. And that's about, you know, the best we could do as you know, residents in our community, and not being experts. So, but I appreciate John does have a little bit of expertise in development, and it's very valuable for us, and we appreciate you contributing that tonight again. And it's a lot to look at, but yeah, you have to compare what's on, you know, what's in the general plan and what's proposed. And
yeah. Hey, John, I'll just jump in because you guys touched on this at the end of the EIR discussion, is that's another area to look at, is the consistency of the findings in the EIR, the draft EIR, with the general plan. So that kind of does, unfortunately, bring up a whole other level of reading and comparing documents, because the draft EIR is just a monster usually. It's just a big document. So.
Yeah, the bigger the project, the bigger the document. So, well, thank you, John.
Sure.
We're running behind, but I'm going to jump ahead real quick. And real quick,
So can I just add a comment?
Are you on?
People need to understand.
There you go. There you
That
go.
the Central El Dorado Hills project, the specific plan proposed, is far more than just the golf course.
Yes.
People refer to it as a golf course. The golf course is 98 acres. the project is much bigger than that.
Exactly.
So when you draw conclusions to the specific plan, you have to address it all. You can't just address the golf course, right? So I just want to make sure people know the scope of the project is not just that 98 acres. There's a lot of confusion out there on that.
Yeah, and I mean, it's conceivable too that, maybe, and I'm not saying it is or isn't, maybe that is a good use on the golf course, but like you said, the Pedrical side, maybe there's something there that we should be looking at that we haven't seen. We got to look at it kind of comprehensively as an overall benefit. Are there negatives? Every project, I'm sure, has negatives. Does it outweigh? Is there is there a positive at the end of the analysis? And that's, as residents, the best we could do is try. So, and I think that's how we're trying to be diligent and trying to be thoughtful and thorough when we look at it.
There are also entitlements currently there,
Yes.
which means when people think of open space, it's always going to stay the way it is. That's not true either. So they have the right to build with certain things. So I think that needs to be right, because again, there's mass
Appropriate to the
confusion
zoning,
out there about what the current entitlements are. The no project alternative doesn't mean do nothing. That may very well get developed in a different manner than what the community might like. But
Some of those
just recognize
alternatives.
that. That's all.
Circulated drafts. So
Right, exactly. So
all things to consider. And it's a big project. We were talking about it since I want to say 2014, but 2012, even before 2000. Yeah, it's been a while. 2015 from I think the EIR came out.
2012 on some of that.
Yeah, 2012. Yeah,
Very
so
early on.
we're almost 10 years into this. So we don't want to get hung up on one project tonight, so we're going to jump ahead. But I did want to point out real quick on the APAC website, if you're interested in the general plan, sometimes on the county website, it's hard to see it. Everything that's on the county website, we have copied on the APAC website. You go to the menu, look at documents, go to El Dorado County, look at El Dorado County plan from the menu, and then there's a link to the adopted general plan. Again, it's a lot of fun to read. So, and those documents are there. The general plan is so big is that there's no way we're going to download that entire thing. So we have most of it linked, but elements of it that are pretty static, we have hard saved on the website. So Chrissy and John, I'm going to turn to you guys tonight. This is an example of how community members get involved. And the most recent example we thought that was good to consider tonight, a little bit of a history of how we do this, is the Montana El Dorado Phase 2 project. And that was proposed, I want to say in 2017 when we first had the NOP. And then neighbors were concerned. So Chris, you have a microphone. So these are just examples of how we have the project listed on our website. Some of the documents just here, you can go and look at the website if you really want to read them. But Chrissy and John, if you guys want to.
Yeah, I just want to preface Christie's remarks that, I've been dealing with APAC for maybe close to 15 years now. And the glaring problem with APAC is that we do not have sufficient resident participation in these projects. And an example of a community coming together to work on the Montano project is why I think we asked Chrissy to speak tonight, because she is the person that got that going. So, I mean, we want to use her expertise in saying, hey, other people, this is how you can do things. So that's my take on this.
Well, I'm honored that you call me an expert, but I am not. And when you guys posed this to me, I started thinking, well, what advice can I give? And the biggest advice is, I think, getting it involved with APAC. You guys make it a safe place to ask the stupid questions, to try to read Sequa and the environmental draft, because that is so far from my expertise. And you see those 400+ page documents, and it's very overwhelming. But as a resident who is living, breathing, and sleeping in this area and will be impacted by this, for example, Montana development, we just, as Tim said, we read through it as neighbors. We have a Facebook community page just for our neighborhood, and that's really where the discussions were held, because it was COVID when the EIR came out, excuse me. But we just threw, as Tim said, we threw all our concerns out there. We tried to stay very specific. You know, there were residents who, I don't want this. And that was their comment. Well, okay, we've got to be realistic here. It's coming. It's a phase 2. It's coming. What about this specific development do you not like? The amphitheater was a big one. The hotel was a big one. And that huge tower was another issue. Those all got modifications because we were loud about it. We were participating with APAC. We made it very clear in our report that went to the Planning Commission. So the Planning Commission was able to really back us as residents too, knowing that this was going to be a significant impact. So staying specific, staying vocal, using APAC as someone who can really help in an area that many of us are just not knowledgeable in. So yeah, that's really where we came from. And you know, some people in our neighborhood would not say that we were successful. There's still a hotel, but it was modified. There's still an amphitheater, but there are very strict noise control on the amphitheater. The tower got knocked down because of elevation changes with residential backyards. I also want to say, throwing those ideas out there, phase 1 was a huge discussion. The parking lot was a terrible place to drive in. People were making illegal left turns out of that middle section. Going up that hill, you can't see anything. So even through this process, phase 1 is going to have some modifications done to it. So those can be seen as success. Did we stop the project? Is that realistic?
A lot, our approach, especially the last several years, is we're not about trying to stop or approve a project. We're trying to see what the impacts are, and then have residents have a voice in the process. It wasn't even proposed by the Transportation Department at the time. I think that modifying that left in and out at the non-signalized driveway, and the Planning Commission was very aware that that was a concern. The applicant was very concerned. And I will say the applicant was really willing to talk to APAC several times and talk to residents. Might not always get the answers might not always get the project we want or we think would be better, but he was willing to hear it. So that was very valuable. And I know that John, I know that you probably want to talk about a little bit about how the Planning Commission treated that project too, but you go ahead and jump in.
Yes, and I was thinking about that as you were talking. The many times when you go to a planning commission, you bring your project up, APAC will present what they've found, and it's gone within 10 minutes. Okay, this particular meeting, which was chaired by our District 1 Representative John Wagner, went on, I believe, almost 4 hours, possibly 5 hours. I have never seen a project be covered in that length of time. And actually, what happened, if you followed the meeting, there was a lot of give and take, a lot of, if you don't agree to this now, it's going to go someplace else. And that's when the builder turned around and said, all right, we'll lower the tower, and he agreed to other kinds of things. So I personally think that in this particular case, our Planning Commission did a wonderful job, okay? Although I didn't particularly like to sit through 5 hours of this, but he did a wonderful job, and I've never seen that kind of thing happen before. And he used the stuff that your community, Chrissy, the stuff that your people found, and he used that to actually say to the builder, hey, let's bargain on this. Let's talk about this.
Yeah, and I just want to clarify, there were really only 3-4 of us who read through the environmental draft. Everyone else was really urged to make public comments, and they did. They wrote their letters, and we, again, were very specific with what we wanted to see changed, modified, or included.
And based on that, we did a subcommittee report, and we passed that along to the planning department and to the planning commission. But if the community is reading and they're not participating, but they look at that support and they see something that maybe we didn't hit, you have an opportunity to share your thoughts on it as well. And if you think that we were right, you can cite what we did. If you think we were wrong, you can cite what we did. You say, hey, this project is actually going to be a benefit because X, or this concern isn't as valid. It's all fair. It's the whole point is having the community involved in the process. And I think the planning commission did hear you guys because you're pretty vocal. And we hope that we support the community, whether we agree with the community concerns, whether the community agrees with our concerns. Just participating is the important part.
It's also, you know, when in a Montano de Oro project, you guys were very specific. You kept the emotion out. The Sequa environmental project, they don't look at emotion. They look at, are you challenging it for specific reasons? What's wrong with the report? Technically wrong with it. It gives you a basis, as you said, to negotiate with the developer. The planning commissioners use that, and a better project than was originally planned resulted that address some of the neighborhood concerns. And that's how the process works. I mean, another successful one where APAC teamed up with the initial Saratoga retail, you know, the Chick-fil-A, there was a huge, and the neighborhood got together on that. And they worked with APAC, writing some letters and stuff like that to get a result that at least initially was better for them. The traffic issues still remain, and that was a special APAC meeting last month, but those traffic issues will be continued to be monitored and addressed going forward. So participation is key. It's not just APAC, you know, 6 or 8 of us writing some report and sending it out there. It's getting the community say, do you like what APAC's doing? Do you like the report? How can you add and benefit, add some benefit to the report? And it's time and effort, and it's reading very dull documents. You want to fall asleep at 10 o'clock, 11 o'clock at night, start reading the environmental impact report. You'll be out in 15 minutes, no doubt.
I would like to repeat with that though. I mean, they are daunting, and I really feel like, John Davy, you answer all my emails, you know, as best you can, or you know exactly who to send me to, you know, to get my answer, or to at least be the squeaky wheel, and someone will hear me.
And that's the thing, is that we don't have all the answers, and we need to be able to, you know, the planning department's very engaged with us when we ask. The transportation department's very engaged. They're always willing to talk about it. We might not like the answer, you know, maybe we don't think it's right, but you know, in terms of code and state standards, highway manuals, you know, those type of things, we need to hear that. We need to hear why it's okay or why it's not okay. So, and I think that's an important part. If we don't ask, we don't get an answer. We just, and they don't, and also they don't hear it from us. They don't know it's a concern. So it's important.
Where, you know, where do we go from now? I'm kind of, but it would be nice, just like with our CCNRs, how we have a rep in each village. It would be nice to have a rep at APAC with each village. So when these projects come up, there's someone that you can go to, or the neighboring village that you can try to get a little more volunteers from residents in that general area. I know John over at Four Seasons, you're kind of the spokesperson over there, and you can get people to join in when projects are affecting your neighborhood.
And it doesn't even have to be your neighborhood, you know, it's our community. So if you have a concern, and you know, this all sounds so daunting as we talk about the process, and you know, we're lucky we have an expert tonight. We have a couple lawyers here tonight. We don't want to tell people it's so hard that you shouldn't try. You know, we'll help you as best we can. You might be helping us, is what it comes down to. Participation is just, I'll repeat, that's the key. And that was John's point about, you know, people participating at the meetings for many years, especially during the recession. Projects kind of stopped. You know, that was going on. You have a lot of projects that were approved 20 years ago that are still kind of in limbo and waiting because they have 20-year development agreements. So APAC, you know, the participation dwindled, and I know that we all have busy lives. At the time, I want to say during the recession, I have very young kids. I have very old kids, and I'm old. But I have that time now because I'm not doing 4 soccer practices a week and 2 Girl Scout meetings a week. And so if you have a day, if you have an hour, we appreciate any help you have. Do you have anything else on that? Do you wanted to?
No.
That's hard to believe.
Can I add one thing?
No,
Yes.
I'm anxious to go home.
Okay.
As Marty said, working with the planner at the county is also very important, because you can ask questions of the planner, they'll come back, and that increases their sensitivity. And you can say, well, if you walk the project, you know where I'm talking about, this corner that's got this problem stuff, there's drainage holes. And if they say no, then you invite them to come meet you out there and look at it, because the planner responsible for a project seeing and understanding the circumstances, real time is far better than a planner sitting at the desk looking at a 3D model and trying to understand what's really going on. So I think Marty hit the key. He gets good responsiveness from our planners.
And when you do engage the planners, our planning department is very responsive. They're very busy. And with the fire, they're going to be even busier.
Yes.
But yeah, will remind everybody though, if you want to invite somebody to go walk a site, you got to get the property owner's permission before you go walk it. So
Agreed.
yeah, so just
Unless you're with the planner, because the planner always has the documents and they can go walk it anytime they
for
want.
sure? Okay.
Absolutely.
Oh, good. There, I know where I'm going to buy my e-ticket from now on. So we're going to jump forward. So I'm going to do this as quick as we can because this is just sort of instructional. If you want to get our email is once a month. It's this agenda, where we're going to meet, the link if we're doing it virtually. We might send a second email if we have to change something in the agenda or we have something to remind people of. You can sign up on our website. That's what the form looks like. It's basically your email address, your name. We do ask if you can include what village you're in El Dorado Hills. You don't even have to be in El Dorado Hills if you want to be on our email list. You can. We'll try. I mean, it's been one email a month for several years, so we're trying to keep that consistent. So the link's on there. It's on our website up there in the menu at the top. The county has a very robust email list that you can subscribe to. And that's a link. We'll have this. It'll be posted on our website as well. It is on our website underneath links. But you basically go in, you put in your email address, and what you'll see is a list like here, the different topics. And there are more topics that I can fit on this screen. But if you want projects, if you want transportation, if you want news about Board of Supervisor meetings, Planning Commission meetings, those are the best ways to get that information directly from the county before even we could share it. So it is very robust. So I would encourage you, if you are interested and you want to know what's going on, go to the website, put in your email address, and then just go through that list and pick out what you want to know about. There's a lot of information about traffic impacts when there's road work planned. So those emails come out pretty consistently. The other thing that we use as a tool, and the county's changed this, there's been several versions of project tracking at the county over the last few years, and which is why many of our links from old projects are broken because they disappear. But right now the permit tracking is eTrack-It. And again, links on our website. There's a link here in this document, and we'll share it. And again, it'll be shared after our meeting. You have to have a user account now to actually see the project attachments. So you have to sign up. It's a free user account. So when you go into it, you log in with your user account. You can go to project. You select the project. Search projects because it's a permit tracking. So there are many areas of it, but we look at projects. When you get into it, you're looking at, there's different criteria for how you can search a project number, a project name, the APN of the site of the property. If you know the parcel number, that helps a lot. But none of us know all these things. So if you don't know it, if you get an email from the county, it'll have it in there. It'll help you search. You could try a project description. The county's getting better at being consistent with how they enter this information in. Before it was kind of hit or miss. I mean, the same developer can have multiple projects and their names entered differently in them. So when you're doing the search, it's kind of hard to see a consistent result. But our best option so far, after you get, when you select what you're going to look for, begins with or contains, because if you get part of it wrong or you don't have all the number or the information or the name or the APN, you get a list of search results. And so when you do, and this actually is just a search result for the Town and Country Village. I just had it on my screen when we were doing this. So it shows the listing for that project because I searched by project name on this one or number. I'm sorry, I'm trying to remember. But then once you get there and you click on the project, there's a list of project attachments that are available for you to look at. And they're all in PDFs. In Track-It, they don't make you download the information. So you can just look at the screen. But this is a very useful tool. The challenge that we have is that when we get a notice from the county, specifically the planning department, it'll say documents are available in Track-It. Well, now they do remind you have to have a user account, but they never link directly to the projects. Like the old system, they would send the link, here is the project. And so you have to search. Yeah, I found that if you put there's a URL variable you can put in for the project number, it'll go right to the project. So I don't know why the county doesn't share that. And I've asked the IT department about that and I've never gotten an answer. We try to link to the project number on the EDHAPAC website when we have these documents on the document page. So, but that's how you see, you click on the attachments, you can see the documents, tentative maps, or, sort of the pre-app or whatever you're looking for. So the other place we look, and you'll get this in the email notifications, like the Board of Supervisors, when their agenda comes out, or the Planning Commission, is Legistar, which is the calendar, the filing system for meetings. And link is here. Again, it's linked on our website. You go in and you can look at just the Board of Supervisors, you look at anything you want in terms of the county commissions, committees, boards. And it's literally a calendar. They'll have a link to details about the meeting, then they'll have a link to the agenda as a PDF. On Legistar, you have to download everything. If you want to look at a document, you have to download it, which is a drag. But since things kind of just disappear or links get broken, we've just, for the last year, just downloaded everything, and it's on our project pages. So, and when you go in, like this is an example of the Planning Commission meeting for tomorrow. The one thing that really we'd be looking at is like they're going to address the accessory dwelling unit. They're having a hearing about that. So you can see on the side there's the file number. You click on the file number, and the file number will show you all the attachments that are available for the public to look at in terms of the staff reports, the recommendations, the area maps if it's appropriate. Just all the information is available to the commissioners.
And public comments.
And public comments, yeah. So the other challenging thing, sometimes in Legistar, if an item is continued to a future meeting, the link stops working. So you want to go back and look and see, well, what was that public comment? Well, that link's not there anymore because it's not active until 2 weeks before that project's back before a commission or the Board of Supervisors. So that's a little frustrating, which is why we generally don't download public comments, but we try to download the pertinent information and share it on the website. So on a website for projects that impact, or for the Board of Supervisors and the Planning Commission, we update it. I update it every time there's a notice that there's a new meeting, and we'll go ahead and if you go into the website and you go to documents, El Dorado County, look for Planning Commission, Board of Supervisors, and then we'll just list it. And what we do when we list it, you'll see it in the list. It's a calendar. It's by the date we entered it. So there's a Planning Commission meeting for tomorrow, and then once you go in and click on it, we actually have over there. We'll have anything that's pertinent to El Dorado Hills listed. Not everything on one of those agendas is relevant to us, so we try to hit the important parts. This is an example of the supervisors' meeting minutes, and the agenda is right below it. The meeting minutes after they get released. I think I did one today right before I left. But on our website, we'll go ahead and embed the meeting video for both the Planning Commission or the Board of Supervisors, and we'll have the agenda item, and then we'll have the results in terms of a vote, a call for a motion, how the vote went, and the result. So we try to have that updated within a day or two of when these are released. So, but that's a good way to, instead of having to navigate through Legistar on your own, it's a good way to do it. It's quicker, and it's El Dorado Hills specific. How can you respond to projects? We've talked about that a lot tonight. So if you're talking about something just with the project planner, you can just email the project planner. It's listed on the project documents. If it's something you want the planning department to see, you CC the planning at edcgov.us, and typically that gets to each of the planning commissioners if it's a matter before them. And if you want to CC a supervisor, I know John likes to see all those emails, so those are the board. Well, Cindy likes to filter all those emails, and Cindy answers all of them too. But but if it's appropriate, you think that a supervisor should see it, even if it's not your supervisor, throw it in. Can't hurt. Planning Commission specifically, you can email the listed project planner. If you CC the planning department there with that email address, it should get to all the planning commissioners. The current planning commissioner email list is at that document page And it hasn't been updated yet. We have one new commissioner. And then for the Board of Supervisors, the same thing. You would email the clerk of the board. You could CC the supervisors, even though they should see everything that goes to the clerk of the board. And then you could, as a courtesy, CC the project planner or planning. So these are just be consistent. And what you want to do is you want to have the project, the name, the number. You should try to be consistent with what it is, so that people know what you talk about, especially if it's in a subject and they can quickly get to it. If you want to contact us to volunteer on a project, info@edhapac.org. Multiple people receive that. Our email addresses for our officers are at the top of all of our agendas. Try to be responsive. I still have to work at a job. Tim has luxury of being retired, but Tim is also on the fire board, so Tim's a busy fellow as well. John Ranslier will talk to you. Brooke will talk to you. Just send us some information and let us know that you're interested in something. If you have a question, we answer questions all the time. That's it on our project. I know we only have a couple attendees in online still, but real quick, if we have some questions we can answer, because we're 5 minutes over. We have just 2 other items we want to cover, but if there are any questions in the room, there's too much of me talking. Okay, and there's none online. Brooke has her hand up. I don't know if she wants to talk, she can talk. Turn that on. Oh, here she comes.
Sorry, I had it up about the general plan. It was just a quick question. I didn't know, just based on everybody's experience, but what about can the residents or the community members make an amendment to the general plan by way of a voting measure?
Well, measure Y, measure E.
Yeah, you can have a voter initiative that does that. Yes, it amends the general plan. And Measure E was the last attempt to do that, but I'll warn people, it needs to be well written, because the lawsuit that pursued that determined that most of the Measure E requirements were not valid, that they were basically unconstitutional and taken out. So you have to be very careful if you're going to try to do that, that all that effort that goes into it isn't for naught. So
right, I was just wondering, like, the converse, right? So there's the petition or application for an amendment to change the open space zoning, but could the residents in turn do their own initiative that would prohibit some kind of changing to an open space zoning unless certain conditions are met?
Wow, that's tough. I would refer to elections lawyers, but I don't think you can.
I was just wondering if anybody in the county has tried that before.
Well, as an example, if I owned a big piece of property that was zoned as recreational facilities open space, I don't think you could go in and change the zoning on my property by a ballot measure. But if you want to change the ordinance or standard for how that happens, it's a mechanism of the general plan.
right.
That might be, okay. I'm talking to the lawyer, so you should probably be counseling me and not the other way around. But there is we have amended the general plan by ballot in the last 20 years, twice at least.
Correct.
And that was Measure E, and which other one?
Measure Y.
Measure Y.
Measure Y, Measure E. Okay. Thanks, guys.
And there's been other initiatives brought forward even before Measure Y, but they didn't qualify for the ballot. So there's been a number of efforts to try to do those things. Measure Y was the first significant one.
Yeah.
In terms of a voter initiative that changed the general plan.
Got it. Okay.
Yeah, the amended.
And it was the second Measure Y.
Yeah.
That's true. So
so that's why
then
I
there's
said
Measure
three.
E. So
Okay. So to wrap this up, put a bow on it. We did talk a lot when Supervisor Heidel addressed us about the redistricting process. Special meeting tomorrow night. You can be there in person in Placerville. I'm trying to be there. You can participate during a Zoom. There are at least 6 maps now on the website that you can go and look at and see what you think of it. I sort of made my feelings known. I guess I'll continue to do that. But you can participate via Zoom. It's important if you have concerns about this, because a lot of times, a lot of people will end up saying, next year, as an example, in all likelihood, I will not be in District 1. So, but I have a lot of neighbors who will go, what do you mean I have a different supervisor? Did I move? Is this not El Dorado Hills? If you're not aware of what's going on, you can't, you can't participate and offer you know, what your concern is. So if you have a concern, it doesn't have to be that you're for or against anything. You can just say, hey, well, I'm curious about how this impacts sort of communities of interest and how, you know, we're represented, because you know, some of these alternative drafts, you know, parts of El Dorado Hills have 200 members in one district, you know, 400 members in another, 7,000 in a third district, and then, you know, 38,000 will basically still be in District 1. I don't think 200 people in one district from El Dorado Hills, I don't think that's representative for the members of El Dorado Hills, and I don't think it's representative for the other members of that district, but that's just me. So.
Question back here.
I just have a statement. Are you aware that that is not the correct date?
Oh,
Say the 14th?
well, I am aware now.
All right.
Well, you know what it was, is that I was focused on today. I'm in the present. I apologize for that.
It is actually tomorrow, so
Yeah.
yes.
Yeah, but it is in Placerville, so. Well, I got the day of the week right, and I got the time right, so. Okay, one demerit for me. And then again, there are 6 alternatives now on the website. You can go and take a look at them. They're all PDFs. You can zoom in.
There's actually 7 now, isn't there?
7.
7.
Okay, so I've got nothing right about this.
There's one that they call a census, which just got there today, I think. I wasn't even aware of it till earlier today. So.
Okay, it's not posted. And I talked to a community member who had been working on a map, so I'm assuming that might be it. So, but so these are the ones you could see online as of last night. Go and look. The Supervisor Heidel brought all these maps here. They're huge. If you have an opportunity here in the room to look at it and be wowed by the work our surveyor's office has done. The other thing, I'm going to turn to Tim, the El Dorado Hills Community Services District Board of Directors meeting tomorrow. And again, it says Thursday, October 13th. So I'm hyper focused on today.
For those who aren't aware, a preliminary comprehensive fiscal analysis report has been done for the possibility of a new city of El Dorado Hills. The report was commissioned by the CSD, and they work with agencies including the fire department, the sheriff's department, and irrigation. I'm going to briefly read a few things just to summarize it, but so let me start. The new city's budget forecast shows adequate positive cash flows and reserves to fund service levels at least equal to or greater than currently provided by El Dorado Hills Community Service District and the county services. The forecast shows the accumulation of contingency and reserve funds for short-term cash flow, emergency repairs, or other unforeseen events, and to increase capital improvements, funding, and other reserves. The analysis assumes that Community Service District is dissolved and its assets, liabilities, and services shifted to the new city. Alternatively, the Community Services District could become a subsidiary district in the new city, and the city council would serve as a subsidiary district's board, and other functions, including CC&R enforcement, would continue unchanged. This, as you know, we had an election several years ago, and cityhood was turned down. The issue has been brought up over the last 2 or 3 years by certain groups and people who say they're really unhappy with maybe the way planning goes, and they'd like to see more planning control done in the city rather than at the county level. They may be concerned about inadequate sheriff's response. They may want to pay more in a new city to get more sheriffs or more police personnel. This is a preliminary. What are the next step if the decision is to go forward? One, the CSD would have to decide whether they would be the applicant and push forward. The CSD is probably going to have a good discussion on this tomorrow night at their meeting, but they're going to want to see if the community's effort, will they raise some money to help pay for the cost? The costs include getting a full comprehensive fiscal analysis. This preliminary report was about 80 pages. A comprehensive one will be a couple hundred pages. They go a huge deep dive into the county services that are provided to the new city and how it's going to be paid for. Then there has to be a LAFCO. LAFCO is a local agency formation committee. They have to approve any new city or annexations or anything else that happens anywhere in the county. They commission reports. The environmental impact report will be commissioned. The comprehensive fiscal analysis is very long, very detailed, a 10-year, a 20-year plan. How will city resources income measure against city expenses? One of the things to look at in El Dorado Hills, if we become a city, we have a lot of gated communities. Serrano, say, those agents, those homeowners associations, they're responsible for their own repairing those streets. That means there's more money to repair the streets that aren't behind gates. That could be a benefit to a city. Once the CFA is done and the LAFCO process goes through, and this is all very long term, we have to have a revenue neutrality negotiations with the city, between the new city group and the Board of Supervisors. That's basically our alimony, our divorce payment, if you would, to the county. The county has people, they provide services. Some of those people may get laid off if the city takes over those services, and we have to cover the county for that. So that's going to be a long, probably very difficult negotiation. Once that's done, LAFCO says, yeah, go ahead and do it. There has to be an election. We have to have an election to decide whether cityhood is right or wrong. There will be people on both sides of the issue. At the same time, as was done in the last city election, if the answer is going to be yes, then we can say, okay, who do you want to vote for the 5-member or 7-member city council? That was what was done last time. Finally, if that all happens, we have to have the turnover date. The projection in a preliminary report was it would be July 1, 2025, because it takes a long time for this to happen. There has to be a transition period of 1 year. The county will provide services for a minimum of 1 year. Of course, the new city will reimburse the county for those services. But then the city council is going to have to determine, what do they want to do going forward? Do they want to hire the sheriff's department and say, hey, we want you to provide the same services you are now, but we want you to hire 2 additional sheriffs to be stationed in El Dorado Hills, and we will reimburse the sheriff's department for that. They could decide, no, we're going to form our own El Dorado Hills City Police Department. But all those decisions, how the city will run, that will be by the determination of the elected city council. That city council could be members currently of the CSD, it could be other community members. So it's going to be a very important project. I'm sure you're going to see it on Nextdoor, and the people are going to be going back and forth. The most important thing is read the preliminary fiscal analysis in detail. I think it's posted on our website.
I didn't post it there yet.
It'll be posted on our website in a couple of days. Read it, ask questions about it. If you're interested in volunteering, talk to the CSD, talk to Steve Ferry, talk to city members who have sort of led the city group over the last few years. Express your interest and get involved. If you're not interested, still get involved, because it's an important project, and it really will probably be the last time we'll be looking at it for the next 20 years. It's going to be almost like it's a now or never event. Any questions on that?
That's
The preliminary discuss schools is where you are a high district.
I don't think the preliminary, I think it keeps the fire department as its own agency. The school districts are 3 school districts.
Are not changed.
They're not
Representatives,
changed.
they don't change the corporation.
Yeah.
Unless you become a charter incorporated city or town,
Okay.
then you can control schools. That's a
You
city.
can, but it's still a determination of
Yes.
what's on the ballot.
What's later.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, and there are a lot of elements, I've always liked the idea of local control, because again, we're talking about supervisors that are in South Lake Tahoe, that are in the South County, that are north of, I'm confident that they take a good consideration of what's the impact of the overall county and our communities. But you don't, you can't always be confident that those consistently thoughtful people will always be there. So I like the idea of local control, but again, the dollars, it's got to make sense, and the services have to be there. A lot of people are right now saying taxes are going to go up. That's the only thing that could happen.
Yeah.
But we don't know that.
It's a question of how the city council is going to determine. I mean, if they decide to build a city hall, that's going to cost millions of dollars to build a city hall. If they decide to use the current CSD facilities and make that city hall, all right, that's already done and paid for. If they decide to rent some empty building and use that as a city hall, they can do that. There's just so many things that will have to be considered, and that will come out more in the comprehensive fiscal analysis, and also during the negotiations with LAFCO to determine what your government structure is going to be and what you're going to do. one of the earliest proponents for cityhood and EDH, said he wants to be a contract city. Basically, he wants to have outside companies hire all the city workers so that we don't have any pension liabilities accumulating. Hard to do, difficult to do.
Hard to do in California.
In California, it was done down
In
someplace
Georgia.
in Georgia. They said it was great for 3 years, and they said, "Oh, the hell, this isn't working." And they decided to hire all their own city employees. So
Is there an alternative in there that doesn't include the CSD being part of the incorporated area?
A part of it could be its own standalone, I think is what
the issue with the city, the CSD could stay in charge, basically of parks and stuff like that. The big issue was if we become a city and the CSD dissolves into the city, there's no CC&R enforcement because the city cannot enforce private agreements between residences.
Talking about unfunded liability with CalPERS, that's the
Yeah.
part that is a big driver, and I hope it's in that report.
I'm trying to remember.
Not in the preliminary?
Yeah.
No.
Well, it's got to be there if they're talking about incorporating to the boundaries and the CSD being a part of the incorporated area.
John, I'd have to look again. It's been 2
Okay.
months, 2 weeks since I read the last reviews, but I know that will come out in the comprehensive.
Yeah, and the other, and just to scare everybody some more, the preliminary report is saying, it looks like upwards of $800,000 to get to the next. So CSD in their staff report is suggesting that CSD contribute $400,000 to this, and that the community and like Chamber of Commerce, local businesses raise it to $400,000. That's a big ask. I mean, that's hard. Right. And a lot of people are already challenging the CSD because, there are things like the tennis court at Stephen Harris Park needs $200,000 in repair, and the CSD is talking about they have $200,000 of cash on hand. But now we're talking about $400,000 for a cityhood effort. So where's the priority? And then I think if a local agency is the sponsor, the timelines are a little accelerated, are they not? I mean,
You have to circulate a petition and get, I
Yeah.
think it's
25%.
25% of the public. That takes a long time.
And it's expensive.
And so you jumpstart that whole process, and the county can cover the cost for a maximum of 1 year. If you don't get the timing right, you're only gonna get 2 or 3 months out of it.
Yeah.
So the timing is critical on all this stuff as well. And I'm not sure if that's in the feasibility study.
It is,
But it
but
should
basically,
be.
they said it really has to be done at the end of a fiscal year, at the beginning and end of a fiscal year.
I
Otherwise,
hope the county turns the numbers around real quick, which was not the previous experience. They delayed and we had to start over.
yeah. well,
So,
but you're a supervisor with the county now, so that.
yes, and maybe it'll happen quicker, but it was Joe Harn and some of the other people that weren't able to respond as quick as they needed to. So, in my opinion.
there you go. So, but that is an important meeting. So we have 2 important meetings tomorrow on the 14th, and I got the dates wrong on both. Didn't get the date wrong on this. Our next meeting is November 10th. But if you can attend one or both of those meetings, I'd encourage you to do so. Being informed is very important, and participation is important. This is a long night. I apologize for the length of time we took. This is something we talked about doing a long time ago, but we didn't have any projects this month. We thought it was an appropriate time to do it. On November 10th, we're going to have Pioneer Power here to talk about the change to Pioneer Power in January of 2022 for our electric service here in El Dorado Hills, El Dorado County. And then we also have CJ Freeland from the county to talk about the update to the housing element that's required every, is it 8 years? So that was just been, the Board of Supervisors has been working on that for a while. And CJ's agreed to come in and give us a talk on that. I'm hoping we're not 2 hours for that, or 2+. I apologize for the length of the evening. I apologize to the fire department. Thank you for your kind offer of your facility, and we're probably going to see you next month. So with that, if there are no, oh, I'm sorry, go ahead. Likely to be here. We will announce it. We just haven't scheduled it yet because we've been doing a lot of virtual. So it will likely be here.
When APAC has a month with not a lot of activity, I would encourage you to consider a presentation on master circulation and financing plan, similar to what we have in Missouri Flat in the county.
Well, if there's somebody that can address it, because we're not experts, but if it's coming up.
In the county to address it, because that is the way you keep the dollars here to
Yeah.
develop the infrastructure.
Well, that's an arm wrestling
So
match
it's been
too.
around Placerville, but it hasn't been down here.
Yeah. And I know that, and I've talked to several people about it, but I don't know any of the details. Would love to have somebody come down and talk about it. Because that's talking about how we keep those dollars here specifically for roads, but you know, that's how a lot of the stuff in Placerville is getting done. Well,
Natalie's very familiar with it, as are other
Oh,
county
yeah.
staff.
oh, wait,
So
let's put
when
our
it's
invitation in
appropriate,
now. So,
when it's appropriate, because I think it's something that needs to be looked at.
well, if it's coming up for
December.
consideration,
December's a quiet month.
yeah, well, yeah, in December, we're gonna have our vote for our officers. So we'll have that slate out in November, and then voting members will be able to vote on our officers for next
That'll
year.
take 2 minutes.
It'll take about, well, I don't know, there might be some drama or something, but I appreciate everyone coming out tonight, and I'd like to adjourn the meeting
Yeah,
just so
Chrissy,
everybody
you're
go
gonna be
home.
nominated.
There you go. So, but thank you everyone for participating tonight. Marty, thank you for all your time. We'd love to call on you again. So, and we'd love your input on as we look at things. So if you want to participate, that's entirely up to you, but we enjoyed you having you here tonight. So thank you everyone for sitting through a very long meeting.